many times over the years. I mean, I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and so over the years, I've definitely had kind of those moments. But I actually, one time, I went as far as, I don't know if maybe a year or two ago, I went as far as putting in an application for Best Buy. I don't know if you're familiar with Best Buy, but I mean, I know you're in Australia, I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, so, and I actually put in an application, and they accepted it, and they wanted an interview.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't that I was going to quit what I was doing. It was that I felt like I needed some separation, because I work from home, and we homeschool our kids, and we have 4 kids, and and I just felt like I needed to be able to get out of the house and do something completely different. Just I don't know, and then it quickly dawned on me, what am I doing? I was gonna have to actually come in and work during times that I might not want to work, or wear a uniform and get paid hardly anything, and so I quickly.
Very considered.
I don't know. And I got that out of my system, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it was it was never going to happen, but I actually went through the motion.
Hi, I'm Kath Hughes, one of the coaches here at WP Elevation. I'm also a WordPress consultant and designer based in Sydney, Australia. In this episode of the WP Elevation podcast, I had the pleasure of chatting with Eric Hamm of Cobot Apps about the challenges of selling a WordPress theme and managing a community whilst remaining sane and profitable. I hope that you can stay with us.
This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
Hey, this episode of the WP Elevation Podcast is brought to you by WP Elevation. Well, more specifically, it's brought to you by a bunch of our happy customers. See, frankly, I feel a little bit awkward telling you how great WP Elevation is, because you're probably not going to believe me, because WP Elevation is my baby. It's something that we started over 3 years ago. Of course, now we're a team of coaches and mentors, and we have hundreds, and by the time you're listening to this, probably thousands of members all over the world. But it still really is something that I'm very passionate about, and of course, if you join WP Elevation, we make revenue and we make profit. So it's a little bit awkward if I tell you how great it is, because you probably think I'm just trying to sell you on it, and partially I am, because I know how beneficial the program is. So what I'd love to do instead is just introduce you to some of our customers. So if you go to wpelevation.com/thepodcast, all one word, you'll be able to hear some of those stories from our customers and hear for yourself how WP Elevation has impacted their business and changed their lives. I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you check it out at some point. Right now, let's get back to the podcast.
So, Eric, welcome to the WP Elevation Podcast. For those who don't know, Eric is the dynamite behind the Dynamik theme, which is a child theme for Genesis. And he's been reinventing WordPress and creating an amazing platform on top of which you can build websites without needing to code. Do you want to give us a bit more of an intro, Eric? I think things have changed a little bit since then. What can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. Basically, I started back in 2009 with a little free theme called Frugal, and then that transitioned over to a framework called Catalyst, and that had a child theme called Dynamik, and eventually I ported that over to a dynamic child theme for Genesis when that started becoming really popular, and eventually I basically moved all over to Genesis at that point. And since then, a ton has happened in the last 2 years. So that's basically what I've been doing, over the last 7 or 8 years.
Fabulous. And you've got a bit of a posse, haven't you? 4 children? Did I read that right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, 4 kids. We have 4 boys, and they're from baby up to 7. So
awesome. So that's all happened in the time that you've been coding as well.
Exactly right. We had our first boy or child when I basically a few months after I came out with Frugal. So yeah, it's pretty much the whole time we've been having babies. So
it's got a job you got to do there, right? And so.
Yeah.
That puts you in an interesting position. You're obviously working from home, and you've been growing something. Can you tell us, as a theme developer, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing in 2017 in the world of WordPress, and as a developer and as a freelancer? Sort of talk us through it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no doubt that, like I said, a lot has changed. I mean, I could go through the history of the last 8 years of like the huge shifts that have happened. Obviously anything from, responsive design was a huge thing, several years ago, and everything had to become responsive. And then, theme frameworks, parent theme, child theme, then specific frameworks, like I said, Genesis became kind of the framework that everybody seemed like they had to have or whatever. But the last year or so, the huge explosion has been page builders, like page builder plugins. That's been the real big thing. I've developed the Beaver extender plugin for Beaver Builder. That's kind of become the big, page builder plugin. And I think the reason its popularity has gotten so big is because it's tends to be the most compatible. It doesn't use short codes, so if you deactivated it, it doesn't leave you with just a mess of short codes. And they've got a huge community of people that develop. I've worked some with the developers, and they're really good guys and stuff. So it's one of those things where people are more and more kind of going in that direction, wanting to kind of get on the front end and drag and drop and kind of build, point and click type stuff. So that's been a huge transition because, more and more stuff is going from back end to front end. And that really changes the way you code the theme, the way you present the UI and things like that. So that's definitely been a huge shift for the last year or two.
Yeah, so I mean, we're very familiar with Beaver Builder. I use it on my sites, and a lot of our members use it on their sites as well. The guys over there are doing a fantastic job. And I guess it poses for you guys the challenge also that in that they're producing a new solution for theming, and how do you keep building your product to still be sort of necessary, I guess. But going with the flow and actually providing solutions for it has been fabulous so far. So I've had a look over your plugin for that as well, and I'm very impressed. But I think it's really good that people are moving in the same direction, and actually like working together on it and getting to know each other rather than sort of fighting and trying to be no we're bigger. So it's fabulous to hear that. So Eric, we kind of know what you do, and we'd like to hear a little bit more about what you've learned in your journey of getting to here. Folks who are listening in, there's no need to take any notes. You'll be able to download Eric's tips for managing a product-based community on our website at wplelevation.com/Eric Hamm. So as we've said before, you're dad to 4 gorgeous boys, and so no doubt the time commitment is always a juggle. How much time do you spend on the business now, and how have you learnt to kind of find that balance?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, with each child, you've got that, you go through the baby stage, so you go through this period of about a year where you're just not getting any sleep. So that really poses a challenge. I take naps in my office, on my office floor, a lot, because I'll hit a few hours of like intense coding, and then all of a sudden it'll just hit me that I had like 3 hours of sleep the night before, and I'll just conk out on the floor for like 45 minutes. And then, so it's kind of crazy. But it's also kind of nice because it really, the freedom that you have when you work, in kind of online, and you have that, you kind of work when you want to work and when you can work. It gives you the ability to really kind of form your business around your family's needs instead of what you would do in a typical job, which is, formulating, basically your family kind of has to submit to the needs of whatever job you're working at or whatever. So it's definitely been a challenge, but you just kind of find a way to make it work, and you do it.
So can I suggest you get a couch for your office, dude?
It's not so bad. As long as I've got something that I can ball up and put my head on.
Not even a yoga mat? Christmas present, wifey. Yeah. Christmas present. No, that's fair enough. Look, I know personally I'm a parent as well, and I have definitely had those moments where the juggle is that the only time that exists to actually get the work done is in when they're asleep, and when time doesn't usually exist for other people. So I have I'm more of an early riser, so 3 a.m. is my get up time if I'm going to sort of put in some extra hours. But I know that, you just kind of do what you need to do in that respect and keep trying to justify it. So if we can move on a little bit to actually the community aspect of things and just the logistics of being a theme owner, this is kind of a two-pronged question. How do you look after support for your licensed customers, and how do you support the community where some of the people may not even be customers of yours? They're kind of just like looking for information. How do you kind of manage that, and if you can sort of share maybe how much time that takes up in your week?
Yeah. So let me kind of explain the things that have changed over the last couple of years and explain what I've done. So when I first started, the big thing was you had your product, and then you did all your support in a forum. That was kind of the big thing. The support and forum were kind of just like one word. But over time, more and more people started shifting over to email support and kind of phasing out their forums. I think one of the reasons is they have more control over the conversation. Forum threads can get out of control. Sometimes it's hard to kind of control who's logged on and who's not, and do they have a license and all that kind of stuff. So also half the time, people post a question and then you're like, hey, I need your login information. Can you send me an email? And it just kind of saves a step. So basically what we ended up doing a couple years ago, which is what a lot of people did, is moved over to Help Scout, which, is a popular email kind of support. And they've got, you can do knowledge-based stuff and everything. But our community was kind of like, okay, that's fine, but we really love having a forum, just even to connect with each other. So I basically kind of reopened our forum and called it the Cobalt Apps Community Forum, and made it real clear this is not a support forum. We may throw some support in there, but for the most part, this is for you guys to kind of help each other out, and that's worked out really well. It's kind of it's been the best of both worlds. And so now we do most of our support through Help Scout, but I'll pop onto the forum occasionally and answer some questions. But there's a lot of great people in there that help each other out. As far as people that don't have a license or have questions, usually we either get direct emails or they post in the forum, because anybody can register in the community forum, which probably surprise you is I interact with a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter and things like that.
Which seems to be the done thing, doesn't it? Do you have a separate? So do you find that the community and the support have come together in that community forum, and so you're actually, in a way, you've actually reduced the amount of like simple tickets that you're having to answer, because the forum and the support and the community are kind of one and the same?
Yeah. So check it out. So basically, when there was the support forum, it's kind of like it was everything was right there, and I think that's what made it kind of difficult to separate those kind of basic questions that anybody could answer and the ones that really should be in front of you with taking your time. And so basically, what people have learned over the last couple of years is to kind of layer your support. So you've got basically the community forum where people generally just pose those simple questions. You can answer it for each other. There's a person that kind of end up naturally becoming sort of a moderator, and so she does a really good job of helping out with that. And then the next level is you can just contact us directly through our contact form if you've got like pre-sales questions or whatever. And then the main one, of course, is you log into your account page, and there's a big contact form at the bottom, and the only way you can access that is if you have an active license and everything like that. So you can contact us through that. We get your license information through Help Scout and everything, and then we can help you directly. So by the time somebody comes to one of our support people or myself or whatever, they've usually got a question that actually needs our attention, and we can address it right away, and we're not distracted answering those common questions and stuff in the forum and everything.
It is actually community building. People love to be generous. Do people love to be generous? People are naturally generous when when they've learned from other people themselves, and so I think it's like it kind of the community stuff. It kind of builds on itself. In that people who have asked a question and got an answer then go back in there, and if they see a question they can answer, they'll answer it, and it kind of they feel like they're being useful, and they're also giving a little bit back. And I think it also models what is going on with things like the Genesis theme as well, is that, you know, you're built on top of the Genesis theme. So you've got the backing of the fact that their community support is so strong as well. And people have already kind of learned to look after each other a little bit. So that's really helpful as well. Thank you for revealing that. Do you actually have a team over there now?
Yeah, well, really, it's basically myself is the main person, obviously. And then there's one guy, David Mayfield, who's been with me from the very beginning all the way back to the Frugal days, and pretty quickly wanted to kind of help out. And so he's been kind of a, you know, small paid staff who just kind of manages that kind of stuff. There's been a few other odds and ends, you know, people that have kind of helped out, but for the most part, it's just been kind of me and then David. And like I said, there's Sylvia is in the forum. She's just a member who's, you know, been helping out a lot, and so she kind of became a moderator and things like that. Like you said, people just kind of naturally, you know, want to help out, and then I just try to make sure, if, you know, like with David, for example, it got to the point where I started kind of paying him because he was being so consistent and helpful and everything. So it kind of worked out for both of us. So.
Oh, we like that. Yeah. We like that. I guess when you've got people who become staff because they're enthusiastic, they're the best kind of people to have on your team. I think that's how I ended up being a coach at WP Elevation, just quietly. So I love too that you've moved to Help Scout too. It's such a great product, and even if it's at its small level, it looks after small teams as well as big ones. Very impressed with it. So I'm going to ask a little question. It might seem controversial, but answer how you can. How often do you review customer licensing for the theme? And so in terms of like what people pay and who gets to use it, and have you ever had pushback from the community with that, and how do you kind of deal with it?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think the biggest concern when we were transitioning was the same problem that everybody had to deal with. So, like we talked about the changes that have happened. That was one of the major changes over the last, you know, several years, is licensing. Everybody realized this is not going to be sustainable if we're not, you know, if it's a one-time purchase and then you support them forever. So, you know, I know Woo Themes transitioned over license, and they had a huge pushback, and you know, and several other people. So that we did the transition shortly after Woo Themes, and so I kind of saw what happened there, and so I recognized that the biggest pushback was the people that purchased and with the idea that it was a lifetime license, and then they're told all of a sudden, well, it's not really a lifetime license. So even though I knew it was going to be not maybe the best business decision in the long run, it really, you know, it's kind of, you know, it could go either way. I decided to just go ahead and just say, hey, you know, not only is everybody who has already purchased, they do have a lifetime license, but then I basically gave like a 2-week window and said, if you want to buy into this lifetime license, you can go ahead and do it. And of course, I had the biggest month I've had in my entire life, of course, which, you know, at the time was great. But in the long run, you know, I mean, I'll tell you, there's thousands of customers that would be paying me potentially yearly who won't ever pay me for Dynamik or Extender or whatever. And that's kind of the price you pay for that. But what it did is it alleviated the biggest potential pushback, was those people saying, hey, you know, you changed what you said, and so we just decided not to make that change. So there really wasn't any controversy after that, because, you know, anybody after that, there's nothing that they could say at that point, because I gave every possible opportunity to go ahead and do that. So, you know, that's kind of that. And like I said, I mean, to be honest, I mean, I've mentioned this in other interviews and stuff. That was you know, I sometimes question that decision, because even though I know at the time it might have been the most honorable thing to do or whatever, business wise, I mean, I know that that I've taken a big hit, you know, because we're talking about thousands of potential licenses that ultimately were kind of grandfathered in. But that's the decision I made, and you know, I think the biggest thing is I always tell myself is if your business isn't successful because of one thing like that, then, you know, you've got other problems, because, you know, there's many ways to profit from, you know, honorably from a community. And So that's what I'm trying to do.
I think that was, I've seen this play out in a few different businesses, and I mean, as a customer of Cobalt at the time, that was fantastic for me. I actually was one of the people who threw some more money to make sure that I had both the plugin and the extender. So the child theme and the extender as well.
Right.
And I remember sending an email out to heaps of my buddies telling them to get on board in that 2-week period. So I don't know if that helped or hindered you, but I was very thankful for the opportunity to do that, and I've been a loyal customer ever since. So still point people in the direction of Dynamik, teamed with Beaver, teamed with Genesis, and don't look back. So I guess that's always going to be a big strategic decision to make, but I think in your case it sounds like it was the right move for you. You've still got a roof above your head, maybe not a couch in your office, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting though. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to ask too, have you changed your processes and workflow much since you started? I guess there's been significant technology changes since you started theming. But what changes sort of made the biggest difference in your business and in your time management?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, one of the things, we kind of already touched on this, but, I used to spend several hours every morning just going through piles of forum questions. And that took up a lot of my time when that's where we did all this, obviously the support and everything. And I'll say, in some ways that was actually a way for me to stay really connected with the community, because I was constantly aware of exactly the questions they had, even the little, a lot of times, even the little questions that maybe could be answered by anybody, that keeps me informed of what people are, wanting, what new features might need to become, things like that. So, but that's what I was doing. And I ended up kind of having to shift, once your membership, surpasses, 10,000 or whatever, you get to a point where you can't do that, all by yourself. That when we shifted over to Help Scout, that really changed the way I worked. I kind of worked more based on scheduling my time instead of kind of feeling like I was trying to on the treadmill of the support forum, and so that was definitely a huge transition. Another one I would say, just from a development standpoint, and maybe this might not be relevant to too many like consultants or whatever, but I shifted everything to the cloud. I'm actually on a Chromebook right now, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm in transition with another computer that's on its way or whatever. But I've been using a Chromebook really as a primary machine for several months, just as kind of a challenge to myself to see if I could do it. A $300 Chromebook, but what it forced me to do is move everything to the cloud. So all my development, for example, I do through Cloud9, which has been great because I just, it helps me compartmentalize my different projects and stuff a little easier. But also just all the stuff that I do, it's nice to have the freedom to just pop to a different computer, and I just basically pop onto my cloud and I kind of just do whatever I need to do. So one of the things I've always loved about WordPress, businesses and stuff, especially development, is that it gives you the freedom. I always tell people, I have the ability to work as long as anywhere there's an internet connection, right? Well, moving to the cloud, it gives me the ability. I don't even have to be on my own computer. I can just be on anything. So it's just kind of a nice kind of freedom thing about how I work or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. There's been so many changes over the last several years. I honestly, most of them have been family related. Like we just moved to a new city about 2 hours away, and we did it right after we had our fourth child. And like it's been insanity over the last while. So I would say, one of the craziest things, I also during the last 4 or 5 years, I've struggled with something called, and I don't mean to, hopefully this isn't TMI here, but it's called leaky gut. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, but it's basically, autoimmune, issue where it's usually triggered by like gluten or dairy or things like that. But what's funny, and I think this is relevant enough, so I'll share it anyway. I was the other day I was actually looking through the Beaver Builder Facebook group, and I was just reading some of their posts, and then randomly I looked at my plate of breakfast, and I was like, I'm gonna take a picture of this and post. And I was planning on posting it on my timeline. I was gonna post about how one of the biggest changes I've made in my diet is changing, like completely getting rid of grains and just going with vegetables and things like that. And so my plate, I took a picture of a plate with, red pepper, carrot, and avocado. And I was like, here's my breakfast. And, I used to have leaky gut. And one of the things that I did to heal it was to get rid of grains. And I posted it, not realizing that I posted it to the Beaver Builder group. And so all of a sudden I start getting all of these responses, and they're all web design related. People are like, making jokes, and they're like, talking about stuff like related to my products. Like somebody made kind of a comment about Dynamik, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, what's going on? And so then I realized that I posted it there, and so I responded. I was like, oops, my bad, I didn't mean to do this. But what's crazy is, and I guess the point of me sharing this is, within like 24 hours, there's like over 100 comments on that post, and what was interesting is so many people were basically like, I've had health issues. I had leaky gut. I had this, I had that. People talking about their diet changes, people talking about like their struggles, and talking about, maybe what they did to do, whatever. People asking about gluten intolerance, and, their children have it, and all this different stuff. And what was interesting is that finally somebody asked, why did somebody post this here? Who cares about this? This is not, web design or Beaver Builder. And a bunch of people were like responding saying, hey, if you don't have good health, you don't have Beaver Builder, or you don't have your business. And I think, the point that it kind of brought me to was, talking about, what have you learned over the last 7 or 8 years, or, since you've been doing this, and what are some tips or whatever. One of the biggest things that I will say is, everybody has their issues, and whether it's family, whether it's health, whether it's financial or whatever. And I think one of the things that I know I struggled with over the years, and I'm sure you too, and anybody listening, is there's a certain like fakeness with like the, anything like this, whether it's social media or WordPress community or whatever, where everybody kind of puts on their hey face, right? Their avatar is like, their best picture, or, everything is kind of edited before it gets, yeah, exactly. And it's all kind of edited before it gets there. And it kind of gives, I think it's people that are struggling, it can give them a false sense of like, well, they've got it together, why can't I do this? And I think, one of the things I think I want to mention is I've screwed up, I've failed, I've got baggage, I've got health problems, I've worked through a lot of the stuff. I've healed some of the stuff, I've learned a lot. Today, like, I've been doing this for a while. I've been pretty successful. It's been kind of up and down, but I've, thankfully been able to support my family and stuff. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's tough, it's hard, and, we struggle and we have issues. And I think it was just refreshing. I think people were saying, wow, this is really nice. I thought I was the only one that struggled with this and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think it helps when people are real and just share their baggage a little bit even, and just say, it's not all, nice shiny avatars and stuff like that. It's real people with real struggles and stuff like that. Random, but
no, I don't think it's random at all. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors on social media, and everyone's just trying to go hard to get their jobs done. But when you do let down the guard a little bit, you start to learn that you're also in a community of people.
Right.
Who all have their backstory, who all have their baggage and their struggles and their wins, and things that they're celebrating and things that they're working on outside what they do for a job and what they do. And when you are immersed in particularly businesses where there's people working either in a freelance capacity or in small businesses working from home and things like that, you can be isolated. And if it's all just business, you're going to lose your hair. So I think that it's really important to take stock of that sort of thing. And I mean, if it took a post on leaky gut on the wrong wall, so be it. I must go and have a comment. I know that occasionally we do the at WP Elevation, we occasionally sort of everyone show what you who are your pets, who are your kids, kind of thing like that. And it's a close community, but we like to see the human side of people, and we like to let that in because it's really important. And as you said, if we haven't got our health, we haven't got any of this stuff. So very important, and thank you for sharing that story with us. So my last question before we wrap up, I just want to know, and you can keep this as short as you like or as long as you like, but I just want to know, what do you wish that you knew when you started? What is the one thing that if someone had told you when you started, you could have saved yourself a lot of energy or a lot of time?
Yeah, I would say I'll share a couple things kind of right off the top of my head. Number one, pace yourself. That would definitely be one thing. It's so easy to kind of jump out and be like, all right, the harder I work, the further I get. And, I can kind of, if I can, get this to market before this person, then, I'll have more market share and all that kind of stuff. And what you end up doing is you're building really bad habits. And so you might be able to sustain that for a short period of time, but you're going to burn out really quickly. And then even if you rest and get your energy back, you've really learned some bad habits. So you're going to struggle trying to find a balance at that point. So I kind of, went too hardcore early on. And then that kind of leads to another one, which is feeling this idea that, like maybe you start to see other people doing things better than you, and you start to see maybe different things coming out. Maybe you had an idea and they came out with that idea before you did or whatever. And I think taking kind of smaller steps and being patient and recognizing that a lot of these things are either fads or they'll come and go, or sometimes the better position is to be second to market, where you've had time to look and see where their customers haven't been dissatisfied, and you can kind of hit those points. And it's just the idea of being a little more confident that time is not the enemy, and that you can actually just take things as they go. Because I know, for example, I'm sure so many times over the last 8 years, I've thought, oh no, I've got to get this done. I've got to do this quick. And I look back and I can see historically now that that there was no huge time crunch, and I just kind of killed myself trying to get to a certain place that I didn't really need to get to. And then the third thing I guess I would mention is just the importance of figuring out what you're best at and focusing on that as best you can. Because the whole jack of all trades thing, the internet is full of people that try to be good at a lot of things. And so if you kind of do that as well, you're just going to blend in with the crowd, and you're just going to be that's not a real good recipe for success. And so I would definitely say, in the past, I more and more, it was just very easy for me to try to kind of please everybody and do everything I could. And I realized that I was doing a lot of things that I'm just not good at. And so, and it would show. And so, that would definitely be something else that I probably, that I'm learning now. But, you kind of look back and you're like, be nice if I had, kind of hit that a little harder earlier on. But yeah.
Thank you. There is a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, particularly in internet world, and you do see people doing things and throwing things out there rapid pace into the market, and it is a bit scary. But I'm going to take note from you on the pacing it one, because if you do it right and you do it well, in with the knowledge of perhaps other people's failings, then you're onto a good thing. Hey,
well, and not only that, one of the things I was going to add to that. Just the fact that people see consistency over time, and they respect that. And one of the things about this business here, I know I kept thinking about before the interview, I was just kind of thinking, what are some things that I can kind of bring to the table that might be unique to, other people. And I think one of the things from my perspective, I develop tools for web designers, right? And I say web designers, consultants, whatever, whatever you want to name them, people who build websites with WordPress. And if you do this long enough, you realize how important it is to be consistent for your customers, because they're depending on you to build reliable, continually updated and supported products that they can not only use to build their clients' websites with, but that they can have their clients, be happy that years down the road, that stuff's still working. It's still, it's still being updated, and it makes them look good. And so, it's easy to throw out a good idea idea or whatever. But if a couple years down the road, you kind of jump ship or just kind of go in a completely different direction, that can leave your customers in a bad spot. So I think, the other thing is, whatever you're doing, recognize that if you're in this for the long haul, then the more consistent and reliable you can be, that might not be a viral post on Facebook or whatever, but over the years, your customers will notice that, respect it, and I think you'll start to be more successful because of that. People want to be a part of that team or that community, as opposed to the kind of like fly by nights. So
yeah, beautiful. And I think, when everything's moving so fast, just taking a step back and realizing that, you've got an opportunity to put out quality and something that's scalable and something that's sustainable and particularly when you're creating products that people then use to create products for their own clients, you've got 2 layers of responsibility there. So that is great advice and great information, and I can't wait to put all this together in put it all together so I can sort of take notes and keep it there on my whiteboard. Eric, thank you so much. You have given us some awesome insight as to how we can look after our communities, whatever product it is that we are producing, and to look after ourselves in order to be able to continue to produce that product so that those communities still exist and so that you have a sustainable, wonderful way of looking after your family and your many, many boys and your beautiful wife by your own mission, I believe. Just before we finish up, what's happening next for Cobalt Apps and where can we find you?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we're, you kind of, with the way things are going, you either have to kind of fight against, other developers and other products or whatever, or you work with them. And that's certainly another huge trend over the last year or two. More and more companies and developers have kind of been working together and everything. So I've been definitely working some with Beaver Builder, and, they've got their theme and their plugin. But also I've been just putting a lot of, effort into kind of rejuvenating some of my, other products and everything for Genesis and stuff. So at this point, I'm kind of taking it all in. There's a lot going on with the Beaver Builder. They came out with Beaver Themer. We're, beta testing or alpha testing that right now and stuff. And that's pretty exciting and pretty cool. But I'm also focusing on Genesis a lot and Dynamik and everything. So I'm in the process of kind of, I would say, seeing the best way that Cobalt can provide for the vast differences of my customers' needs, from the Genesis users or the Beaver Builder users, to those who want the drag and drop stuff, to those who want to stick with the kind of more, traditional way of doing stuff. I'm trying to focus on how I can best suit, my customers' needs in different ways. And so there's no kind of silver bullet for that. It's just kind of daily grind and everything right now. So nothing super exciting at the moment. But as far as where you can find me, Facebook, Eric Hamm, or Twitter at Eric Hamm. Those are kind of the 2 places, social media. So, or cobaltapps.com. So.
Awesome. Well, I'll put those links down the bottom for everyone to be able to get to you in one click or less. Folks, if you want to hear more from Eric, please jump on and hit us up in the comments section. We're happy to answer some questions, and we'd love to hear who you would like to hear from next on the podcast. Please be sure to download the checklist that is going to be available at wpelevation.com/Eric Hamm, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next podcast. Until then, go elevate.